Welcome to the next episode of my Full Bullet Advanced Character Matchup Guide. Today's video will feature Red Shigaraki, specifically the red variant, as Yellow Shigaraki will be his own video. As for Red Shigi, this character is very dominant in the late game fights, but in the early game fights, Red Shigi can struggle heavily. For this reason, I would highly recommend taking out Red Shigi before he can get his levels very high. But sometimes this isn't an option, and sometimes this something you simply cannot do. So you will have to be prepared for the matchup as if it were 999s, as that is potentially the worst case scenario for you. Dealing with Shigaraki early is rather trivial, as his attacks have very low range and very poor radius of effect. Simply don't stay in one spot for too long. Throw alphas. Go for gammas, do standard full bullet things against a 1-1-1 Shigi, and you should come out victorious here. Now, as for 999 Shigi, this matchup suddenly changes a lot. The first thing I would like to state is that Red Shigi's alpha is very high damage, and due to the recent changes, you can no longer just hide on a building to avoid it. So, in order to avoid damage from the alpha, I would recommend jumping and doing aerial gammas in order to stay in the air for as long as possible. This will also be useful for avoiding damage from his beta as well, but this doesn't mean you will be able to stay in the air indefinitely, and Shigaraki will still have the ability to land some damage on you. I would highly recommend attempting to stay in the air and landing some alphas, or potentially coming down for a beta should the time be right for that. Now, assuming you can't go in the air or stuck indoors for some reason, this matchup gets a lot harder. If your gamma is on cooldown, I would highly recommend kind of alpha strafing away from him, as he's very tough to deal with a lot of the times when you can't get in the air. So alpha strafing away in order to try and avoid damage and potentially hard knockdown him too can be very prominent way to deal with Red Shigaraki. However, I would not recommend going for this, as this will often mean that you are trading damage with Shigi, which can be very dangerous. I would highly recommend going for gammas in the air first. If you have to go for that because your gamma is on cooldown, doing this kind of jump alphas is very important too. When you're close to Shigaraki too, you can also tend to kind of bully him in the close quarters, since despite Shigaraki being a monster indoors, it's not really because he has a good close quarters game. It's more so for a different reason. So I would actually say that if you are outdoors and in close quarters with Red Shigaraki, the main thing you will have to worry about is him going for a beta, which will cause you to trade damage. However, there is a way to mitigate the damage taken, so that I will showcase later. And Gamma from Shigi, he can use that to kind of grab you out of your moves, and he can use it to interrupt your beta and Gamma if he times it properly and he lands it correctly. This can be very tough for Shigaraki to do all the time, depending on positioning. So I would highly recommend just not using it or not using Gamma while you're in this range, at this close of a range to Shigaraki. Shigaraki's melee combo is also quite great, with his melees and special actions having pretty decent disjoints and having decent damage on them and being fairly quick and snappy. So keep that in mind when you're facing him in close quarters too, as sometimes Shigaraki will probably want to go for a melee combo, which is not something a lot of characters go for, but Shigaraki will sometimes go for it at higher levels of play. But however, you definitely have the advantage against a Shigaraki in close quarters, as there's one specific thing that makes this matchup a lot easier. If you are in your beta, you will take only one tick of damage for going for another beta. This goes for Alpha too from Shigi.
Stay focused.
You can use beta to negate a lot of damage that Shigaraki will go for. You can even do it with gamma, and you will take a total of 3 ticks of damage, and you will be safe from all other damage from that attack. This is, of course, is very expensive to do, as it requires you to use several different beta charges, or use beta into gamma in order to avoid taking a lot of damage. However, I felt that it was important to note that due to Red Shigaraki's lack of a vertical hitbox on his beta and alpha, you can use your own beta to negate a lot of the damage, and the game doesn't really calculate you on the ground until the move finishes, or until you have the ability to do beta again. That is when the game will treat you as on the ground again, instead of when you actually hit the ground. So getting Red Shigi in close quarters can be very tough for him, as he will often only be hitting for 25 or 30 if you play right in the close range, while you will be getting 140 damage on him with your own betas, or 190 depending on if you hit the heal. Now, this doesn't mean that every fight will be taken in the close quarters, as most Shigarakis don't tend to want to get in the close quarters too often. They instead kind of want to rely on like the medium range and using their beta to create an area of deny zone, which Full Bullet is not immune to. Full Bullet should not be going indoors with Red Shigaraki at all. I would not recommend doing that either, as that is a very fantastic way to instantly die. Just for Red Shigi, if he has high levels on his skills, he can be very tough to deal with. So I would highly recommend just staying in the air or trying to get close to him and rushing him down with your betas. I don't think there's much more to say on the matchup. Overall, I would probably give the matchup about, if we're talking 1-1-1, the matchup is a 70-30 in Full Bullet's favor, because Full Bullet's early game is significantly better than that of Red Shigaraki. Now, if we were talking 9-9-9, I would flip that matchup to about a 70-30 in Shigaraki's favor. And if both players only have one level 9 skill, the matchup would be a little more even, probably about a 60-40 in Shigaraki's favor, since Shigaraki really relies on having both alpha and beta at high levels in order to deal with you properly. Just deal with Shigaraki early, and if you end up having to face him in late game, hitting him with alphas from above by using your gamma in order to gain height on him is my ideal way of dealing with a Red Shigaraki. This matchup is still very tough, and it's still something you're going to have to keep in mind, as Full Bullet, a lot of his moves require him to be on the ground to activate, so you will still take damage from Shigaraki, unlike certain other characters that can get by with staying in the air for a lot longer. Full Bullet has to touch the ground at some point. Not a lot of characters have to do that as often as Full Bullet does. I don't think there's much more to state on the matchup. It's not particularly fun for you if you are facing... Oh, there is one thing before I leave. Tomura Shigaraki's Gamma has armor on it. For this reason, it can be very tough to land betas on him without him landing a Gamma on you in certain situations. Since if he is in his Gamma and Full Bullet goes for a beta, the shockwave will not cause a hard knockdown on the Shigaraki, and the Shigaraki will have ample opportunity to grab you out of your beta. This can be negated by landing the heal, or just like calculating and keeping in mind that Shigaraki might be out of gammas soon. Most Shigarakis don't tend to want to use their gammas for combat too often anyway, since it leaves them fairly vulnerable to other alpha spammers that could potentially be on your team. And it also leaves them vulnerable to escaping from you if you end up having the upper hand after the grab is over. But it is worth noting that the grab has heavy amounts of armor on it, so I would only recommend going for beta if you can land the heal, or if you don't really have a choice. Sometimes you won't really have a choice and will have to go for beta anyway, as if Shigaraki's in close quarters like that, you're not really going to have any other options that you can go for that would be better. You could potentially try Gamma, but Gamma's easy to roll since it only has a hitbox for like a second. Or not even a second, it's like a few frames. So just spam rolling leaves you almost invincible to full bullets Gamma. But for even then, Shigaraki will still armor through your Gamma with his Gamma if you land it on him. You can use it to block a red Shigi that is coming towards you. It will stop his advance, but that's about all it will do. Now for Alpha, of course, it goes through the wall, and so does Beta. Beta will also go through the wall. In fact, it will destroy your walls quite quickly. Quite fitting for Shigaraki. Yeah. Overall, just kind of stay to the airs and don't play this fight in Shigaraki's favor, as you do have better mobility than he does. So just don't go indoors against him and don't play him like it's his game. Don't play his way. Play your own way, and this matchup will still be fairly difficult, but it will at least be manageable for you. Red Shigaraki is a very tough fight, but not impossible. Alright, next time I will do Yellow Shigaraki, so be prepared for that and subscribe for more.